ESBR Boxing. We're back, myself and Paul Kelly. We're here in preview mode. But obviously, before we get into that, what I'd like to say is a little moment to say, please like and subscribe to the channel. Obviously, we've got all your boxing needs under one roof. Previews from obviously the big fights, reviews, big fight breakdowns, interviews with the fighters, all that sort of good stuff on the channel. So check that out and please like and engage and interact. As I said, we're in preview mode. We're at Wembley Stadium, Paul. We are here. We're obviously in WBO interim world light heavyweight title action, Paul. We've got between Joshua Buatsi and Willy Hutchinson. Obviously, Buatsi, a guy who we saw recently Wembley Arena, so obviously likes fighting in the Wembley area, coming through a UD victory over Dan Aziz in what was a good and entertaining fight but earlier this year. But what I want to ask is, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, with light heavyweights in this country. Obviously, you look at the likes of Callum Smith, you look at the likes, obviously Buatsi, you look at the likes of Yard, you look at the likes of Lyndon Arthur, I suppose. And what I want to ask you is, where do you see Buatsi? Is Buatsi Britain's best light heavyweight at this moment? Because obviously, they fight, the carousels move around. How do you have the rankings at the moment for Buatsi up at light heavy? How do you survey the scene, Paul, from a British perspective?
Oh man, it's a tough one. I mean, thanks for that introduction first and foremost. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It's one of these where you could sit and debate for a long, long time about Britain's light heavyweight scene because, as you mentioned, you've got Buatsi, he's undefeated. Willie Hutchinson, just that one defeat, but it was down at super middle. It looked class last time out against Craig Richards, who many had back up there. Then you've got obviously the likes of Anthony Yard, who, yeah, his only two defeats he avenged against Lyndon Arthur, and then yeah, okay, he got beaten by Beterbiev in the end, but he had success in that fight. And Callum Smith again, without last time out, Beterbiev ironed him out, but we're talking about one of the best light heavyweight of our era, probably with Beterbiev. So no disgrace there. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say Buatsi's the best in Britain right now. No, could he do it? Could he go on to be the best within the next 12 to 18 months? Yeah, definitely. I think he's got all of the ability to do so. But I don't have him at number one personally yet. I think this fight will tell us a lot more about Joshua Buatsi as well. A lot of people didn't think he was even going to beat Dan Aziz last time, but he ended up making it fairly uncompetitive. It will be more competitive after watching Willie Hutchinson on the 5v5 against Craig Richard, obviously. But I would, at this current moment, still have Callum Smith and Anthony Yard above Joshua Buatsi, definitely. And then you've maybe got Buatsi third, Hutchinson there around thereabouts as well. Lyndon Arthur kind of still hanging about in that top five of the British scene. But yeah, he's definitely up there, mate. But is he the best in? Is he the best from the UK? Definitely not for me. What about you think?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, as much as it pains me to praise Callum Smith, I think you have to. I totally agree with you. Actually, I think Josh Buatsi, had a very commanding performance last time out against Dan Aziz, but I don't. I think it's fair to say that Dan Aziz himself is not necessarily world level, frankly, in that same way. And you look at the likes of Yard and Callum Smith have fought and how they've sort of equipped themselves. I almost feel like Buatsi to me doesn't have that CV or that record. Even the performance against Dan Aziz, I looked at and thought, actually, yes, all right, he made it convincing, but I'm still not convinced he could sort of fight that style and fight against someone like the Yard or Callum Smith and prevail, frankly. So I would still have, I'd still have those two definitely above him. I think Lyndon Arthur's a weird one because obviously Lyndon Arthur has that victory against Yard, but then there was a lot of tragedy in NCR's personal life around that time. And to me, I kind of feel like the way he kind of avenged that loss, almost see it as an aberration rather than a sort of standout victory for Lyndon Arthur. So I think, to be honest with you, Buatsi versus Arthur, actually an interesting fight for me. I'd expect Buatsi to actually prevail in that fight, possibly on points. But I think that would also kind of show us where we're at. And as well, this fight against Willie Hutchinson as well. So I totally agree with you. Not for me, Britain's best light heavyweight. And I think the jury's out a couple of big wins and he could get up there, but he needs to sort of put some names on that record. We've been talking about Josh Buatsi like he's a prospect. And, like he's kind of still 20 and his age is just going sort of further and further. And, we kind of need to see him win those fights. So talking of that and talking of big fights, Paul, let's talk a bit about, I suppose, the world title scene and incorporating Willie Hutchinson in this conversation as well. Obviously, you mentioned the champions up at the division. The likes of Beterbiev, obviously one of the greatest light heavyweights we'd have ever seen. Bivol as well. They're squaring off, obviously. But Beterbiev himself is a man who's not getting any younger. I suppose the question really for me is, do you see 26 Willie Hutchinson, like I said, Buatsi at 31? Do you see possibly a future where Beterbiev's retired, the belts are fragmented a little bit, depending on, irrespective of what happens with Bivol, the belts may have fragmented a little bit. Do you think there's a future where either of these men ever becomes a world champion?
I do, mate. Yeah, I really do. I think you've kind of answered it for me there. I think again, regardless of what we all think happens on October 12th for the Bivol Beterbiev fight, I think Beterbiev does not have long left in the game. I think win or lose, he might even retire after that Bivol thing. That wouldn't surprise me. Say he was to win, become undisputed, retire, belts become fragmented, as you say. Bivol probably still hanging about. You'd have them as the best in the division still. He'd probably end up picking up another vacant title this is all if Beterbiev wins, of course. If Bivol wins, it's also very difficult to hang on to all the titles. So you could see him relinquishing one or two, like Usyk's done for Joshua Dubois in the main event. Dubois obviously having the IBF title now. So yeah, I could see a world in which, yeah, I think one of these two here, right? This is for the interim WBO title, at light heavyweight. So you're thinking, right? You hold the interim title. The next natural step is to fight for the full one. So again, it's timing wise, it could make sense as well. Only 3 weeks, or between this fight and Beterbiev Bivol. If we have the undisputed champion on October 12th, the belts become fragmented after that. This is for the WBO interim. They get a vacant title shot straight away. Yeah, I could see one of them winning it. Willy Hutchinson, obviously, if he's to even lose this to Buatsi, he's only 26. He can definitely come again as well. I think, yeah. I'm not going to sit here and say 100% definitely both men become world champion. I'm not even going to sit here and say with confidence, yes, Joshua Buatsi becomes world champion, or yes, Willy Hutchinson does individually. But I can see a world where, as you mentioned, belts become fragmented, for whatever reason, and yeah, I could definitely see either of them picking up a world title, like some of the others at light heavyweight in Britain, as we mentioned at the beginning, like Callum Smith, Anthony Yarden, and fighters like that. So yeah, I could definitely foresee it, mate. What about you?
Interesting. I'm looking wistfully into the distance there, just thinking about do I see this happening? I think I want to go no. I want to go no, Paul. Actually, I think the reason I asked that question is because I think there's I mean the division's moderately strong. I think there's some names. I mean when I say strong, obviously you've got the top two champions. When they depart, who knows where Benavidez is going to fight? Frankly, will he still fight up at light heavy? Would I back either of these two to sort of go through him? Probably not. But then I suppose you're looking at actually they can get quite highly ranked. So I think these men will fight for a world title because looking at Buatsi, he's already on number one rank in different places, number four rank in different places. So he's right on the pinnacle having a world title shot. I think they can get a world title shot. So could potentially become a world champion, yes. But I think those other names, they would need a favourable draw in some ways for me. They need a favourable opponent to sort of come through that. And I said, would I back them if Callum Smith to fight against sort of Callum Smith, Anthony Yarde to win that fight, either man at this stage? No. Benavidez, I'll probably back him to beat both of these two guys as well, to be honest with you, if he were to fight him. And I you say Bivol's hanging around, what's Bivol going to do as well? So for me, possible, but unlikely, I think is how I'll leave it in my mind. But then if we come out here and Willy Hutchinson absolutely poleaxes Josh Buatsi and Willy Hutchinson's 26, I might be on the review show, Paul, talking about Hutchinson's coming for all the gold. This is how it is. It can really sort of move in that way. Let's go to predictions, though, Paul, in this fight. Obviously taking place. Obviously, a very intriguing fight for the reasons that we've outlined. I suppose I'm going to come to you, really, and just ask how you see this fight going, who you see winning, also whether you see it going the distance, who wins, Paul, and how.
I'll keep it relatively short and sweet, mate. I think as good as Willy Hutchinson looked last time out against Craig Richards, I think Craig Richards was one of the worst we've seen him for a good while. Joshua Buatsi, on the other hand, he also looked really good last time out again against Dan Aziz. You're saying what level is that? Is this a step up in levels? I think that Josh Buatsi has more gears than Willy Hutchinson does. And I think it could maybe be tight early on, as we saw Willy Hutchinson boxing beautifully, as I said, against Craig Richards in the 5v5. Could see him doing maybe that early on, but Joshua Buatsi is a better fighter than Craig Richard is. He's already beaten him as well. I think Joshua Buatsi could work out the Willy Hutchinson puzzle and will beat him on points in a very competitive, but a fight where there's not really any controversy. I think Josh Buatsi wins this 7-5, 8-4 without winning it being a landslide. Very competitive, but yeah, Josh Buatsi, a resounding winner for me. What about you?
It's not often this happens on the preview show, but we are entirely aligned, Paul and I, in our predictions here. I totally agree with everything you just said, actually. I think Buatsi, despite, maybe not looking like a well-beaten, obviously comfortably handled Dan Aziz, I feel like he's got levels and potential to potentially go to, which I'm not kind of sure Willy Hutchinson has the same capacity to do so. Could be wrong, but that's how I feel at this time until he shows us that. That's how I'm going to feel. So I agree. I think it could be quite cagey. It could be quite close early, but I think Buatsi will prevail fairly convincingly in what will still be kind of a tight fight, if that makes sense. I think there won't be any sort of flashpoints. Don't think you have either man will be on the floor. I think Buatsi will prevail on points, Paul. So yeah, we are entirely aligned. for one of these rare moments. But let us know in the comments whether you agree with Paul and myself, whether you disagree, where you think Buatsi is on the sort of the rankings between the British fighters up at light heavyweight, whether you think either of these fighters can win a world title, and also how you see the fight going on September the 21st. Paul, as always, thank you very much for joining me. And guys, as always, like and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.